Hi everyone, notes 4.4 are on solving quadratic equations by completing the square. And it says when solving a quadratic equation by completing the square, first complete the square, then isolate the perfect square, then solve by square rooting. So the first thing we want to do is first complete the square. So let's go ahead and do that. So in our first example right here, it says x squared plus 8x equals 9. So for starters, we have to make sure that the x squared and the x term are on the same side. We also have to make sure that the leading coefficient in front of that x squared is a positive one, which it is. So this is nice. I don't have to do that whole thing where we were factoring stuff out before. So here we know our b value is 8. So I'm going to take 8, divide it by 2 and square it. So 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 4 squared is 16. So I'm going to write down here x squared plus 8x. I'm going to add 16, but then I have to balance it out by subtracting 16, and then I'm going to copy down the 9. And I switched over to orange just to be consistent with the previous lesson. It doesn't really matter what colors you use. So now we have to finish completing the square. So this x squared plus 8x plus 16, that is my perfect square. And when I factor that, it becomes x plus 4 quantity squared. And the reason why that works is because 4 doubled gives me 8, and then 4 squared gives me 16. And just a reminder, we always get that value from this 4 right here. Okay, then I'm just going to copy down the minus 16 and then the equals 9. Okay, then after that, it says right here, first complete the square. We're done with that. Then after that, it says to isolate the perfect square. So let's go ahead and isolate this perfect square. And what's on the same side of this perfect square that we see here is this minus 16. So I need to get rid of it. How do I get rid of it? I add 16. So whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. So here I end up getting x plus 4 squared is going to be equal to 25. And then after that, I can solve by square rooting. So step 3 is to solve by square rooting. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to square root both sides. And when I square root x plus 4 squared, I just get x plus 4. And when I square root 25, I get plus or minus 5. Don't forget that plus or minus. That's so important. Once I do that, I can just isolate the x by subtracting the 4. So now this tells me that my first answer is going to be negative 4 minus 5, and my second answer is going to be negative 4 plus 5. And these are my two solutions. Just a reminder, if you have questions as you're going through this, write them down on the side so you can ask me in class, okay? For this next one, I'm going to write down 17 equals x squared plus 5x. I'm going to start from here. I'm just copying it down. If you notice right here, the x squared and the 5x are on the same side, and the x squared is has a positive 1 as its coefficient, so I don't need to factor anything out. This is very nice. So I'm going to take the b value, which we know is 5. Just because it's on the other side doesn't make a difference. I'm going to take 5, divide it by 2, and square it. Now, 5 cannot be divided by 2 evenly, so I'm just going to go ahead and go straight to squaring it. So 5 squared is 25, and 2 squared is 4. So here, I'm going to write down 17 equals x squared plus 5x, and then I'm going to write down plus 25 over 4, and then I'm going to take away that 25 over 4. And this right here is my perfect square trinomial. So I can factor this as x plus 5 over 2 squared. Okay, I'm going to copy everything else down. And now I want to isolate this perfect square. So I'm going to do that by getting rid of this minus 25 over 4. How do I get rid of that? I'm just going to add 25 over 4 right here. Whatever I do on one side, I do on the other side. So here, I end up getting 17 plus 25 over 4. I haven't put them together quite yet because I need to get a common denominator. So that's going to equal 5 over 2 squared. Okay? So now for this one right here, to add 17 plus 25 over 4, I have to get a common denominator, and this is technically 17 over 1. So my common denominator would be 4. So I'm going to multiply numerator and denominator by 4. I get 68 over 4 for my first fraction, and then my second fraction has that denominator that I want anyways. And so when I put these two together, 68 plus 25 would be 93. So I get 93 over 4. So here I get 93 over 4 is equal to this x plus 5 over 2 squared. Now I can go ahead and solve this by square rooting both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and square root both sides. And now pay very close attention to this right here. So what's left over on this side is just x plus 5 over 2. The square and the square root cancel each other out. Now don't forget that you have to say plus or minus right here. And I cannot square root 93 evenly. So I'm going to leave this as the square root of 93 on top, but I can square root 4 on the bottom. And this square root means everything gets square rooted. So we're going to square root each part separately. And the square root of 4 is 2. So I can say plus or minus square root of 93 over 2. Okay? So now the last step that I need to do to get this x alone is to get rid of this 5 over 2. So I'm going to subtract 5 over 2 on both sides. And I end up getting here that x is equal to negative 5 over 2 plus or minus the square root of 93 over 2. Okay? And then the directions say to round this to the nearest tenth. So what does this mean right here? This is going to tell me that one of my answers is going to be negative 5 over 2 minus the square root of 93 over 2. And then my other answer is going to be negative 5 over 2 plus the square root of 93 over 2. Okay, and we'll show you how to use your calculators properly in class, but the Desmos Scientific Calculator is nice as well. The only problem is you can't use it on a test, right? So we got to make sure you know how to use the calculators properly in class as well, but I'm going to show you how to do this on the Desmos Scientific Calculator. And I'm literally going to type it in exactly how I see it. Now, I'm going to type in a negative, and to get a fraction in Desmos, I just have to press the division sign or the division key, and now I have a fraction. So this is negative 5 over 2. Okay, and then I've got minus the square root of, but I still need a fraction here, the square root of 93 over 2. And this answer right here gives me negative 7.321825338. Then I'm going to do this again, but with a positive sign in between. So negative 5 over 2. And then I'm going to say plus, put in a fraction, the square root of 93 over 2. And my other answer is 2.321825338. And because I have to round to the nearest hundredth, I'm going to look at this number right here and see that there's a 1 that comes after it. So I'm going to say that this is approximately, and even these were approximately as well, because this goes on forever right here, negative 7.32. And this is approximately 2.32. So my two solutions are negative 7.32 and 2.32. All right, my friends. So in this last one, if you notice the 4x squared and the 40x are not on the same side, and they need to be on the same side. And I'm going to put the 40x on this side. It doesn't matter what side I put it on. It doesn't matter if I bring the 40x over to the left side or if I bring the 4x squared over to the right side, but I prefer the a value is positive. It doesn't matter either way because I'm going to factor out that 4, but it might be easier to deal with just a positive a value here for right now. So I'm going to subtract the 40x, and then I'm going to have the plus 93 at the end. Okay, now I need to factor out this 4 right here because the a value, we need it to be 1 when we're trying to complete the square. So I'm going to say that this becomes x squared. Then I'm going to write down minus 10x, and then I'm going to leave some space to complete the square. And then I'm going to write plus 93 and then equals 0. Now to complete the square, I figure out the b value, which is negative 10. Divide that by 2 and then square that. So I end up getting negative 5 squared, which is 25. So I can add 25 and subtract 25 to balance it out. This is my perfect square trinomial. So I'm going to copy down the 4. Then I'm going to copy down this x squared minus 10x plus 25. Then I'm going to get rid of this 4 times negative 25, which is negative 100. And then I'm going to copy down the plus 93, and I'm going to say that that's equal to 0. Now I'm going to factor my perfect square trinomial here. And this would be x minus 5 squared. The reason why is because negative 5 doubled is negative 10, and then negative 5 squared is 25. I'm going through this a little bit more quickly now because hopefully at this point in time, we're getting a little bit more comfortable with this stuff. If we're not, that's okay. Come see me and I'll help you out, okay? So, and then I want to put this minus 100 and the 93 together, which gives me negative 7, okay? Now I need to isolate my perfect square trinomial. So I need to isolate this x minus 5 quantity squared. The first step that I'm going to do in isolating this is I'm going to add the 7 to both sides. So I'm going to move the 7 over, and now I get a positive 7 here. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to divide everything through by 4. So here I end up getting x minus 5 quantity squared, and that's going to equal 7 over 4. Now, in order to solve this, now I'm allowed to square root. So I'm going to square root on both sides, and the square root will cancel each other out here. So I get x minus 5 is equal to plus or minus. Now, I cannot square root 7, so I'm going to leave this as the square root of 7, but I can square root 4, and I get 2. Okay, then I can just add the 5 to both sides, and I get 5 plus or minus, oh, sorry, this should say the square root of 7, because we couldn't square root it, so we got to leave it as the square root of 7 over 2, which means that my two solutions, because we need exact answers, are going to be 5 minus the square root of 7 over 2 and 5 plus the square root of 7 over 2. And I don't even have to type it into my calculator if I'm asked for exact values. And this is my solution. That's it for this video. Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I will see you in class. Bye.